Hi, Stephen from Owner Disown. Walmart and their overpowered line of gaming laptops caused a real sensation with their top specs at real value prices. Today, we are taking a look at the 17 Plus, which is available for the real low price of $999. But first, let's have a quick word from our sponsor, PDF Element. Want to do more than just look at PDFs? Well, check out PDF Element, the powerful editing tool. Fully edit text, images and other objects in PDF. Convert PDF into fully editable formats such as Word, Excel and PowerPoint. Create new PDFs from Microsoft Office, images and various other file formats. Or merge multiple file types to create one single PDF document. Use the batch process to perform multiple PDF conversions, data extraction or more operations in bulk. Or use hundreds of templates and file forms in their database. The OP17 Plus is a very nice laptop. Its plastic lid has a brushed aluminium look with an eSports logo etched in silver. It doesn't scream gamer either, which is nice. It has a thin bezel design, and for a 17-inch laptop it's not much larger than a regular 15-inch one, and even fits easily into a 15-inch backpack. So this and its lightweight of 5 pounds 11 ounces or 2.58 kilograms makes it a great laptop to game on the go. Its webcam is up top. Here's the webcam, 720p webcam, and it actually doesn't look too bad, but it's a little bit grainy, but not bad at all. Next to the webcam is an IR camera for Windows Hello, and this really worked very well, and it is a welcome addition. On the left hand side you have a separate headphone and mic jack, you have a USB 2 port, an Ethernet jack, a large heatsink and a Kensington lock. Around the back are the video out ports, which help to keep the cables out of the way. You have 2 mini display ports, HDMI, USB-C and a power connector. On the right you have an SD card reader, which keeps the SD card sticking most of the way out. You have 2 USB 3.1 Type A ports and a 4th air exhaust. It has a very nice 144Hz IPS panel made by BOE. The colours are sharp and crisp. Unfortunately, it doesn't handle glare very well at all. As for ghosting, I would rate it behind the 144Hz panels on the Asus Zephyrus S and the Razer 15. Backlight bleed on the other hand is very good, definitely better than most. Colour accuracy is on par with other 144Hz panels, and I think with the larger 17-inch screen it will make it nice to use for content creation. Also, it exhibits PWM flicker, which may affect some users. A max brightness of 310 nits is fine, but if you want to try and tweak out a little bit more battery life by lowering the brightness level, forget it. Forget about anything below 25%. Battery life from the 47 watt hour battery is pretty poor at 3.5 hours, despite it using Optimus. But just like the 15-inch model, I believe you can remove the hard drive and put in a larger battery. The underside of the laptop is ABS plastic, which did scratch when placed on a metal surface, but normal situations it is quite durable. There are plenty of vents for the 2 fans and a central one for the RAM and M.2 drives. Now getting inside is easy, just Phillips head screws and there's no ply tools are needed. OP does put a warranty sticker over one of the screws unfortunately, but once you're inside you have the 47 watt hour battery, a 2 TB Western Digital Blue hard drive, 2 speakers that fire down at the front, and there's also a small subwoofer. They are not super loud, and if you use the FatMax fan it's best to use headphones as the gameplay is drowned out. Here is the CMOS battery and the Intel 9560 Wi-Fi card. You have 2 heat sinks for the CPU, which has one shared heat pipe with the GTX 1060. It comes with a 256GB PCI Express SSD and an open slot above it for a second. There are also 2 sticks of 16GB Gold Key RAM, giving it 32GB total, which is amazing for this price point. The 15-inch models only come with 1 stick, which certainly inhibits performance. This makes the 17-inch laptop so appealing. 6-core i7 CPU, 32GB of RAM, 144Hz panel, a GTX 1060, all for under $1,000. Build quality is also pretty good, despite it being plastic. The panel has very little flex, and the keyboard deck is covered with a nice soft touch material that makes it very comfortable to rest your wrists on. The chassis is made by Tongfang and is used by other manufacturers such as Electronics. Now they all have the same mechanical keyboard with brown switches, which are much quieter than blue switches, yet still give a good tactile feel to them. Blue switches
brown switches.
They are nice and spacious with a separate number pad. There is a very large Windows Precision trackpad, which with a double tap in the top left hand corner will disable it, which is ideal for when you are gaming. The trackpad is very responsive and accurate. Here you have the power button, and beside it another button that used to switch between the game mode and office mode, but after an update it activates the turbofan, which I find is much more useful. At idle, the fan noise is pretty quiet at 35 decibels, and even the auto fan is only 44 decibels when under full load. Now activate the turbofan and you'll get 51 decibels, but as you will see shortly, they do a great job in cooling the system. The chassis is very cool to the touch, the centre of the keyboard being 37 degrees, but the AWSD and wrist areas are super cool. You can see hot air being pushed out both the sides and the back. Underneath is also very cool. The ABS plastic shielding the user from the heat very well. The biggest issue I have had is that my key lighting stopped working after I tried changing it in the BIOS. I have since updated the BIOS 3 times and there's no fix in sight. It doesn't light up even at boot, so I think it's actually a hardware failure, and hopefully it is not widespread. Initially there was no support on their website, so all communication was via email or telephone. They were quick to reply and very helpful, but I was disappointed that they would not send me a new BIOS without instructions on how to do it. The easiest way is to run the FBAT file inside the AFU Win64 folder. So extract that folder and double click the FBAT file. Now the flash runs easily thereafter, and after a reboot you will be good to go. I also tried putting the Electronics Mech 17 software on, just to see if that would fix my light problem, but unfortunately it's not 100% compatible. I would have no fan control at all, and clicking the System Monitor tab would result in a crash. Now they have released a number of iterations of their control center software, so what you see here could well change. The display image can be changed to suit what you're doing, such as gaming or reading, or you can manually customize the settings yourself. On the lighting tab, my backlight wizard has always been blank, and in earlier versions of the software it was here that you could actually change the color of the front light bar, but it has now been switched to the image projection section, and unfortunately after this update my light bar is no longer lit up. Under the fan settings you can choose gaming mode that uses the auto fan, or office mode that allows you to create your own fan curve or manually adjust the fan speed. Office mode gives lower performance but has the benefit of lowering the fans to a minimum of about 30%, if you want a quiet system. Power settings gives you standard or eco, and the system dashboard lets you choose 4 other profiles to choose from, as well as showing system information such as temperatures. As you can see, there are many modes. So what effect do they have in gaming? I tested 6 games using gaming, high performance and equilibrium modes, using the auto fan and max fan, as well as 2 games with the office mode. I also tried equilibrium mode with the performance slider half the way back, so having better performance, to see what effect it had. Finally, I took out a stick of RAM to see what the effect of single channel would have. Now all results are in this Excel sheet, which I will share via a link in the description. As you can see, I record every metric: average and max CPU clock, CPU watts, CPU temperature, average and max GPU clock and temperature, as well as min and average frame rates. Here is the summary. The average CPU clock runs pretty steady at about 3650 MHz, unless you switch the performance slider to better performance, or worse, use the office mode, which sees a drop of about 600 MHz. The CPU does boost nicely to about 3900 MHz, and the average CPU watts is steady at about 35 watts. Again, unless you use office mode, which sees quite a big drop, not only in power but also in frame rate, so I do not recommend using office mode for any serious gaming. Even with the auto fan, the CPU is adequately cooled, averaging in about the 60s and peaking in the 80s on average. I did see the odd spike into the 90s, but it was not that common. The GTX 1060 ran very cool, peaking in the mid 60s. The turbofan is very effective, reducing the CPU temperature by about 9 to 12 degrees and the GPU by about 10 degrees. Undervolting isn't really necessary, but if you do want to do it, expect 16 to 20 degree reduction. If for some insane reason you decide to remove a stick of RAM, expect a sizable decrease in CPU clock rate, watts and frame rate. Even if frame rates don't vary hugely between the modes, so to be honest, I would just stick with one of them. Equilibrium allows you to adjust the Windows power slider, so perhaps just stick with that. So this leads me to my main gripe, and that is the software. There are just too many modes which are not really needed and just adds confusion. The many updates on the software haven't really helped in my case either, because my lighting hasn't been fixed. In CPU work, it performs very well. Cinebench, it is neck and neck with the laptops with the same i7-8750H CPU. Using it to render a 1080p video with Adobe Premiere Pro, it performed on par with the MSI GP63, but that CPU didn't boost as much as that on the Asus Strix Hero 2. In my multitasking test, where I run a 30-minute video encode and Heaven running in the background, followed by repeated runs of Cinebench, it scored 825 points. In comparison, the Hero 2 scored 1049 points and the GP63 945 points, but the Omen 15 was about 500. So I'm confident it can handle multiple workloads simultaneously. Now, using Afterburner, I increased this GPU core by 212 MHz and the memory by 504. In Battlefield 5 DX11 Ultra settings, the CPU averages around about the 3500 MHz mark and around about 45 watts. The CPU runs cool, maxing with an average of 74 degrees and generally peaking in the 80s. The GPU remains nice and cool, but doesn't boost up to its max, typically staying below the 1800 MHz, but compared to the 1070 Max-Q, it performs really close. Overclocking it sees it perform pretty similar to laptops that are double its price. In Far Cry 5 Ultra settings, the CPU averages about 45 watts and low 70 degrees with the auto fan, but can peak to about 93 degrees, but increasing the fan speed will solve this. The CPU averages close to 3700 MHz and the GPU boosts nicely into the high 1800s, staying cool throughout. Here I compare it to the equally spec'd MSI GP63 and the GTX 1070 Max-Q Alienware M15. It does trail the GP63 by about 10%, requiring an overclock to match it. Now this time the gap is about 30% to the higher spec M15. Fortnite Epic settings, the CPU averages about 35 watts, but the CPU averages about 3900 MHz. It doesn't actually take too much to run this game, and indeed the GPU also doesn't need to boost much either. Consequently, the temperatures are nice and low. Frame rates are in the low to mid 80s, and it's comparable to similarly equipped laptops. Now Overwatch Epic settings, the CPU averages about 40 watts and also boosts nicely. The GPU also boosts into the 1800s and runs very cool. Frame rates average in the mid 90s, which is a bit behind the GP63, again requiring an overclock to match it. PUBG Ultra settings sees nice boosts from both the CPU and the GPU, again with very good temperatures. Max CPU temperature was 89 degrees and frame rates would fluctuate between 60 and 70. On average we saw about 61 FPS, which again was about 10% behind the GP63, but on the whole it performed pretty well. So how would I sum up the overpowered 17? Well, for $999 it is a great deal, it really is. You get a very nice chassis that is easy to get into and upgrade. It has plenty of storage options as well, either to hold your games or video files should you want to use it for video editing. The screen is also suitable for content creation and gaming alike. Now it does cool well, has plenty of fan control options and multitasks pretty well as well. Now the keyboard and trackpad are better than most laptops, which are actually double their price. Now of course my backlighting hopefully is isolated, so I'm sure yours will be okay. Now the software has too many mode options in my opinion, and I hope they do trim these down, because all you need is a gaming mode, balance mode and perhaps a power saving mode. But I do like how they have one button press for the turbo fan. Now new laptops are on the horizon, but if you want a good performer at a fair price, you really can't go too far wrong here. Now I'd like to thank you for watching, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.